On this Saturday night, renewed hope for a ceasefire in Gaza. Hamas agrees to peace talks in Cairo as Palestinians battle starvation.
People don't have to die because they don't have food. We need security guarantees.
And the body of another Israeli hostage is recovered. The price tag on pollution putting a strain on farmers.
We absorb all the costs of the carbon tax.
Why some say the federal carbon tax unfairly punishes them. Also, bird flu in cows. Avian flus jump to mammals. The fear is the virus could spread even further.
3 of us living in an aluminum box for 3 months.
And the unprecedented expedition around the world on wheels.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. We begin with a sign of hope for Gaza as Israel and Hamas are signaling they will attend ceasefire talks in Egypt tomorrow. For the first time in weeks, key figures from both sides will reportedly be at the table in Cairo. A potential pause in the fighting could mean life-saving relief reaching Palestinians on the brink of famine. The World Food Programme says it is providing aid to almost 1.5 million people in Gaza each month. And the level of hunger has doubled in less than 3 months, now impacting more than 1 million people. Tomorrow marks 6 months since the war began, and earlier today, the body of another Israeli hostage was recovered in an overnight raid. David Akin has our top story tonight.
The 6-month-old conflict has displaced nearly all 2.3 million people who live in Gaza. And now, nearly half of them, 1 million people.
But we have challenges. We don't have the necessary security guarantees to work here.
The security challenges were underlined after 7 aid workers from World Central Kitchen were killed this week in an Israeli airstrike. In the wake of those deaths, and under pressure from the U.S. and others, Israel opened a land crossing in northern Gaza and a port in southern Gaza, and aid began to trickle in. But more is needed. The World Food Programme warns malnutrition among children is spreading at a record pace, with 1 in 3 children under the age of 2 acutely malnourished.
For us to really be able to scale up, to avert famine so that people don't have to die because they don't have food, we need security guarantees for us as humanitarians, but also for the people we serve in Gaza.
That will be the goal of truce talks set to get underway Sunday in Cairo, precisely 6 months after Hamas launched its attack on Israel. Officials from the U.S. and Qatar will be in Egypt. Hamas has agreed to send a delegation, and an Egyptian news agency reported Saturday Israel will do the same. A key demand of Israel is that Hamas immediately release all the hostages taken October 7th. Israel believes 129 hostages are still being held, and it says 35 have been killed in captivity, including 47-year-old Elad Katzer, a farmer whose body was found by Israeli commandos Saturday. The goal of Hamas and of many of Israel's allies, including Canada and the United States, is to obtain at the very least an extended ceasefire so more aid can reach Gaza's starving population. David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
Both the U.S. and Israel are on high alert, preparing for possible Iranian attacks on their assets across the Middle East. Iran's supreme leader has vowed to seek revenge for Israel's strike on its embassy in Damascus on Monday, which killed 7 Revolutionary Guards, including one of the regime's top generals. According to a report from CNN, a U.S. official says an Iranian attack could come as early as next week, and that the U.S. is at a high state of vigilance. Russia launched a series of strikes targeting Ukraine's second-largest city overnight and again today. The first attack hit residential areas of Kharkiv, killing at least 6 people and wounding 11 others. Russia fired a combination of Iranian-made drones and missiles. A second attack today killed at least 1 person and damaged a school and nearby apartments. Attacks on the city, which lies close to Russia's border and is mainly Russian-speaking, have intensified in recent weeks. On Thursday, 4 people died in a Russian drone attack there. A state of emergency remains in place in Russia's southwest region near the border with Kazakhstan because of heavy flooding. Around 2,000 people have been forced to flee after a dam burst on Friday. Melting ice caused river levels to rise rapidly before the dam gave way. There are growing tensions tonight between two major Latin American countries, Ecuador and Mexico. Late Friday, Ecuadorian police broke into the Mexican embassy in Quito, arresting Ecuador's former second-in-command. The former vice president had been living at the Mexican embassy since December after being indicted on corruption charges. Ecuador said, quote, it would not allow a criminal to stay free. Mexico's president shot back, saying the arrest at its embassy is a flagrant violation of its sovereignty and would cut all diplomatic ties. A somber anniversary this weekend as Sunday marks 30 years since the Rwandan genocide. An estimated 800,000 people were killed during the war, most of them from the Tutsi minority group. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stevenson spoke with retired Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire, the Canadian leader who tried to shelter locals from the violence despite little international support. Mercedes joins us from Ottawa. Mercedes.
Carolyn, it's hard to believe the horror of the Rwandan genocide unfolded 30 years ago. The brutality, the terror, and the sheer scale of violence and killing is unforgettable, especially for retired Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire, who witnessed the genocide in 1994 firsthand. In an interview with the West Bloc, General Dallaire revealed that some of those responsible for the genocide are living freely in Canada.
Many of the bad guys of the Hutu regime ended up in Canada. And I've testified in one trial.
Dallaire says there has been no justice for some of those hiding in our country and that the Canadian government has been reluctant to prosecute them.
The trial was in Montreal, lasted nearly 2 years, cost a couple $1 million. The Justice Department kept telling me that we don't have the money to be able to do the trials. And so these people are still living around.
Dallaire says that he has great hope for Rwanda's future, but also concerns about the country's current government, a government which the RCMP has accused of trying to reach out right here into Canada to intimidate opponents of the current regime. General Dallaire has put his experience into a book now, looking at the underlying causes of war and calling for more than just temporary truces before the world moves on and stops paying attention to certain conflicts. He says without proper attention, they will fester and erupt again at a future date. We'll take a look at another international concern on the show this week, foreign interference in our democracy, with our expert panel. We'll find out what we learned from the public inquiry over the past week.
Well, what jumped out to me is that David Johnston really did a poor job. We learned so much more in 1 week of this inquiry than we've learned from his entire report.
In coming days, the spotlight will turn to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who is expected to testify at the inquiry. Carolyn?
Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa. Thanks, Mercedes. And you can watch more from both of these conversations tomorrow morning on the West Bloc, right here on Global. Justin Trudeau's Liberal government is under pressure on another matter tonight, the federally imposed price on carbon. Ottawa says the so-called carbon tax will cut as much as 1/3 of Canada's emissions over the next 6 years. The goal is to nudge consumers and industry toward cleaner solutions. But farmers say the tax is hurting them unfairly. Marney Blunt reports.
It's getting to the time of year where Roger Voggs fires up his farming equipment for the season. But the Manitoba farmer says running his propane-fueled grain dryer gets more costly each year due to the rising carbon tax.
We're getting a truckload almost a day of propane, you know, so and that pushed the propane price or the fuel price for the drying up about 20%.
The federal carbon tax rose to $80 a ton this week, prompting pain at the pumps.
It's just outrageous. I don't think taxing people is going to save the planet.
And protests across the country.
The intention is to stay until they end the carbon tax.
While most Canadians will get a rebate to cover the cost, it's been at the center of political debate. Manitoba and Nova Scotia's premiers vowed to take up the Prime Minister's challenge to come up with a carbon tax alternative.
We've got a very strong case to make that Manitoba is going to hit net zero.
While the carbon tax is exempt for certain farming equipment, it's not exempt on propane and natural gas used for heating barns and drying grain.
In a lot of cases, that tax is actually more than what the actual fuel cost was to heat that building. So it is a substantial amount. It adds up.
Bill C-234, a private member's bill, aims to exempt both grain drying and barn heating from the carbon tax. But it was amended by the Senate in December and sent back to the House of Commons to remove barn heating from that exemption.
We are the only sector that actually doesn't get to pass it along. Because we are price takers, because we do not set the price for our product we sell, we absorb all the costs of the carbon tax.
Meaning for now, farmers like Vogs will continue to feel that extra cost.
I find it kind of unfair because grain farming produces, tons of vegetation throughout the season. It's probably one of the biggest carbon sinks in Western Canada, and yet we're being penalized for it.
Marney Blunt, Global News, Winnipeg.
There is a major shakeup in the upper ranks of Canada's biggest bank. RBC has fired its chief financial officer. It follows investigations which found its CFO, Nadine Ahn, had engaged in an undisclosed, close personal relationship with another employee. It's alleged Ahn gave preferential treatment to that person, including a promotion and compensation increases. Both have been terminated. From birds to bovines. Coming up, the concerning jump of avian flu to another species. Why that's raising alarms for people. In Baltimore, the body of a third worker who died in last week's bridge collapse has been recovered. Divers made the discovery only hours before President Joe Biden visited the site Friday, vowing to hold people accountable.
My administration is committed, absolutely committed, to ensuring that the parties responsible for this tragedy pay to repair the damage and be held accountable to the fullest extent the law will allow.
Of the 6 people killed in the collapse, the bodies of 3 people remain missing. Cleanup of the wreckage is ongoing. Combined with rebuilding the bridge, the work is expected to cost billions. While its name may suggest it's a virus for birds, the avian flu has recently made the jump to cows, infecting several herds in the U.S. The move has raised concerns the virus might be able to infect other mammals like pigs or possibly humans. Joel Senek has the latest on the research and the risks.
Flocks at poultry farms and herds of cattle across the U.S. are under close watch. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention now issuing a health alert over an ongoing outbreak of avian influenza, more commonly known as bird flu.
It's in migratory birds, and as these birds migrate, they can spread the virus as they land and feed among other birds.
The strain of flu is most common among wild birds and poultry, but can infect other animals like seals, skunks, and now for the first time, cattle. The current wave of cases is impacting herds in 6 states.
For most people, if you're not exposed to these animals, the risk is very, very low.
But that could increase in the coming years, according to the World Organization for Animal Health. Doctors say when more types of animals are infected by bird flu, it increases the chances it will one day be passed between people. So far, just 1 dairy farm worker has been confirmed infected. Their only symptom, conjunctivitis.
Replication within that mammal is going to put a little bit more pressure on that virus to want to change to be more infectious for humans.
Health officials warn that could lead to a widespread outbreak as humans lack immunity against the virus.
If H5N1 bird flu changed in a way to make it transmissible between people, then we would have to really switch influenza vaccine production in the United States.
Canada has not detected any cases of bird flu in cattle or other livestock. In a statement, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency says it's working with the USDA, public health authorities, Canada's veterinary community, industry, and the provinces and territories to monitor the situation closely. Surveillance is critical. Influenza viruses constantly change, and health officials say they're ready to react if the public health risk rises. Joel Senek, Global News, Washington.
Ahead, nearly 6,000 deaths in only 9 months. Canada's failure to address the opioid crisis and what 3 provinces are doing about it. Well, it may not make the daily headlines anymore, but the opioid crisis continues to quietly ravage the country. And despite years of promises and investments by both federal and provincial governments, the number of opioid-related deaths shows little sign of decreasing. As Heather Yurix West reports, 3 provinces came together last week, hoping a new approach will help.
It's been a little more than 2 weeks since Christine Kidd lost her son.
My son, 26 years old, he passed away from a drug overdose on March 17th after a very lengthy battle with addiction. It's going back several years.
More than 8 years into the opioid crisis in Canada, and people, mostly young men, are still dying at an alarming rate. In the first 9 months of last year, the most recent national data available, there were 5,975 deaths, up 8% over the same period the previous year. That's 22 drug deaths every day, and more than 40,000 since 2016.
Connor had 9 very close friends from grade 2 right to post-secondary. 5 of those friends of his all died within that 2 years. I went to 4 of the 5 funerals, including my son, and they all died of fentanyl overdose.
Within Canada, 3 provinces account for more than 88% of the country's opioid poisoning deaths. But Ontario, Alberta, and BC are not dealing with the crisis in the same way. On Thursday, the mental health and addictions ministers of Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan pledged to share ideas as each Conservative-led province pursues a recovery-focused strategy, emphasizing treatment beds over harm reduction methods like supervised consumption sites and safe supply.
When it comes to something like harm reduction, it plays a part in our model, of course, but if you're talking not about harm reduction, but instead the harm production policies of, say, safe supply, that's something Alberta has made illegal. We will always oppose, and that needs to be abundantly clear.
But while BC's strategy includes access to supervised consumption sites and safe supply, that province is also seeing overdose numbers rise. According to a report released by the province's Auditor General last month, BC's overdose prevention programs aren't accessible to all.
We don't do safe supply well enough, and we don't do it for enough people to really see the positive results.
And so a nearly decade-old public health crisis only deepens, with tens of thousands dead and dozens more dying each and every day. Heather Yurix West, Global News, Calgary.
Next, more than 30 countries, 3 years, and a daring attempt to make it to the North Pole. We catch up with the Trans-Global Car Expedition. It was a close game, but basketball phenom Caitlin Clark and her Iowa Hawkeyes are through to the NCAA championship game. Clark, who scored more points than anyone in college basketball history, drained 21 points in the win over the University of Connecticut. The finals on Sunday could be even tougher as Iowa faces a South Carolina team that is undefeated this season. A team of 23 scientists and explorers is heading as far north as possible for an unprecedented journey on wheels. The Trans-Global Car Expedition began in New York, and we have word tonight that the team just made it to the North Pole. From there, they will drive south through Europe and Africa, then looping up through South America. As Neethu Garcha tells us, these modern-day adventurers are pushing the limits of human endurance and conducting scientific research.
Basically, it's an over ice expedition to get to the North Pole with these specialized amphibious vehicles.
Andrew Comrie Picard is part of a group of 23 scientists and adventurers on an epic expedition, giving live updates using Starlink satellites as they approach the North Pole.
I think that this is we're probably doing right now, I think, the northernmost live stream that's ever been done.
It's a mission nearly 6 years in the making. Departing from New York City, their path took them through Yellowknife before heading to the North Pole. They plan to return to the Big Apple by March of 2025.
It's very rough, as you can see. Like, even now, we're looking for a way across this bumpy pressure ridge right there. There's one of the other vehicles. That's a good view of one of the other vehicles.
Made with space-grade aluminum, these amphibious vehicles, which can travel by land and water, carry the team through treacherous landscapes. They're drinking melted snow for water and eating powdered mashed potatoes, dried fruit, and frozen fish.
We had an airdrop of fuel and food about 500 kilometers ago. Whole frozen fish getting hucked out of an airplane so that we can replace the ones that we've eaten.
As they trek through desolate landscapes devoid of any signs of life, the journey goes beyond adventure.
3 of us living in an aluminum box for 3 months.
It's a groundbreaking scientific mission.
We have 2 what are called cosmic ray scintillators.
The team is collecting data on ice thickness, the effects of light pollution on human circadian rhythms, and data on cosmic rays.
This data has never been collected north of 82 degrees.
He says they found solace and support in the indigenous communities they encounter, fostering a sense of unity and gratitude.
I've been very lucky to be adopted by one of the families there. In fact, they've given me the name Omeo. I really want people to maintain that sense of wonder and curiosity, to have people come out. It doesn't have to be here, but just go out and explore.
This team of modern-day explorers reminding us all of the power of human curiosity and the unyielding spirit of adventure. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
Oh, stay warm, guys. And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. Tonight's Air Canada is the Fox Point Lighthouse in St. Anthony, Newfoundland and Labrador. We love seeing your Canada. Please keep emailing your photos to viewers at globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow night. Have a great night.